I thought I would preface this. Prior to retiring out here about a year ago, I directed a nonprofit in Stockton, California. We worked a lot with the faith community, but also communities, particularly of color, lower income communities. And a major issue in Stockton has been the homicide rate, and also in Santa Rosa County. And one of the things that was very true, I think it's still somewhat true within the Sheriff's Department, but also true in the police department in Stockton, is if you were in certain neighborhoods, you did not trust the police. They did not look like you, and you were not treated well. So everybody's seen the Black Lives Matter stuff and all that. That was going on in Stockton like everywhere else. We worked very closely with Eric Jones, who's the current chief of police there. Chief Jones really believes in community-oriented policing, but he also recognized there was a major challenge when you have a huge police department, trying to shift that department from a culture of we're going to come out and beat your head in to we're coming out to serve you. And what that really means, right? Most police officers, 99% of them, are really good people who want to do the right thing. But still, a lot of times police departments don't have a culture where they work well with the community. So I am aware that in this county, the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Office, has been under essentially very similar leadership for decades. And that's one of the questions about having somebody from the outside come in and create a different culture. I think that's difficult for anybody to do. And so one of the reasons we wanted to invite Mr. Mutz here today is because he brings some background in that we think is important for folks to hear and to think about as you go to vote. So with that, let me introduce John Mutz.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. First of all, thank you all for coming. I have a powerful message. However, if people aren't listening to that message, it doesn't matter. So, what we're finding is as we go around the county, people are resonating with this message. So, Tom, how long do I have for to talk and then questions and answers?
About 20 minutes, about 5 minutes to just talk about things, and then it's up to you how you use your time.
Okay, good. Well, I love hearing the questions. I find that the community asks the best questions. So let me start. So I grew up in Yuba City, not too far from here. I grew up on a ranch. And I didn't really think about becoming a police officer. Matter of fact, my local chief of police, George Garcia, was my baseball coach. And one day he comes to me, I'm 19 years old, and he says to me, "Have you ever thought about being a police officer?" And I said, no. I had some run-ins with the local police, and I felt like I wasn't treated with respect. So I didn't like that. But I liked George, my baseball coach. And he said, "Well, how about if I do this? How about if I give you a ride along with one of our officers, and you could see firsthand how it goes?" And I said, "Sure." Now George was like a second father to me, and I love baseball. So what happened was, what I didn't know is George had me ride with his most charismatic, charming, friendly human being that I've ever seen in a uniform. And I spent the whole day with him, and even the situations that could have gone either way. His name was Frank Harrison, and Frank handled them with compassion and humility and understanding. Everywhere we went, people loved Frank. So when we finished our tour, George Garcia came to me and said, so how did it go? And I said, I want to be like Frank. I want to do that kind of work. I want to really help people, and I know that a police officer can do that. So he said, "Well, John, you have to change your major." I was an agribusiness major. You have to change your major to criminal justice, and I did. Graduated from California State, Sacramento, And then the local sheriff's office, Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, much like the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, was hiring. So I got hired. And I was really disappointed. I came in very idealistic, wanting to serve like I'd seen Frank Harrison, but it was a good old boy network. And they didn't share the values of community policing. So I knew that I had made a mistake. But I finished my probation, got my certificate, and the Los Angeles police were hiring. And so I got hired by them. Now, I thought I'd just be down there for a couple of years, come back up north with that kind of experience, you know, that kind of experience you get. And, but I got a scholarship to the University of Southern California in public administration with a specialization in criminal justice. And that graduate work at the University of Southern California opened my eyes to what would be possible for law enforcement. And from there, I rose through the ranks very quickly and rose to the top and became a station commander. So I was a captain, police captain for 10 years and a station commander for 6. And what happened, everybody has like a defining moment, you know, regardless of whether you're in law enforcement or anything else. And my defining moment was, I read in the paper where these 2 nuns had gone into a very dangerous neighborhood. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to be killed. So I reached out to them, had lunch with them, and I said, sisters, you have to get out of this neighborhood. This is a very dangerous neighborhood. And so one of them, Socorro Mesa, came from a large Mexican family, and she said to me, she said, you know, Captain Mutz, that's why we're here. Because we want to really make this neighborhood, the Latino neighborhood, safe. And Captain Mutz, can we tell you something? And I said, sure, Sister Socorro. She said, you know, you look like a nice person, but you know, your officers make this neighborhood worse. You arrest young boys, sometimes for nothing, and you imprison them, and you ruin their families. You write citations to harass people, citations they can't afford to pay. And then you impound their cars. And Captain Mutz, when you impound their car, you take away their job. And both the mother and father are working. And people in this neighborhood hate you. I said, well, it's not our intention, sister. And she said, nevertheless, that's what you're doing. That's called conventional policing. Trying to make a neighborhood safe by arresting, trying to be in control, writing citations, impounding cars. That's what we have across the country. So that defining moment had me step back and realize that she was right and I was wrong. And she said to me, she said, you know, you can be with us, although we can't meet in public with you because of your image, and you can learn from us. And you can help us make this neighborhood a safer, more secure place. And there was a voice in my head that said, this is a good opportunity. And for the next 2 years, I worked with her. She took me around to families. I had dinner. I spent time with families in these neighborhoods, and I got to know them. And it totally redefined my thinking about policing. So as a top person, I was able to bring compassion, humility, understanding, and kindness to law enforcement in the next 4 commands I was in. So we had amazing results. The morale of those stations, and there's 400 or 500 people in each of these stations. These commands are very large. The morale in the stations improved dramatically. complaints went down. And we were able to restore trust in the community and engage the community in a true partnership. So I thought, because of the results we showed, that it would be institutionalized in a 12,000 member police department. And I was wrong. Because the new chief of police came in and said, no, we're going back to the old days. Arrests, citations, vehicle impounds, how many people can we put in prison? And because of my relationship with the community, I could not do that. So I left, and I couldn't leave, because by this time I had a national reputation and visibility throughout our country. So I chose to use my time, both locally, state, and nationally, to be a resource on how we restore trust in law enforcement. And I've been very, very grateful to be able to do that. So how did I get involved in running for sheriff? Well, I have young boys, and my wife, we were living in Laguna Beach, and my wife did not want to raise them in Laguna Beach. She wanted to raise them in a rural environment. This place called Sonoma County, where everybody wants to raise their families. And so we came up here. The boys were only 2. I have twin boys. There were 2 at the time, and the son who was 5, little boys. And we came up here and found a school, a Waldorf school in Santa Rosa. And at the end of the tour, I knew we were moving. So we moved up here. We've been up here for 6 years. The boys are thriving, as you would imagine. And my wife is just loves Sonoma County, as I do. And what happened next is a group approached me here in Sonoma County, members of the Andy Lopez Task Force. They approached me and said, you do this around the country, you've done this before, you've done this 4 times, we need help here. Can you help us? And so I began to have conversations with them, and ultimately it led to, how do we change the system? And I said, you cannot change the sheriff's system unless you get a candidate who will challenge the sheriff in the system. And they said, well, how about you? That wasn't in my plan. So I said, I've got to go home and talk to my wife. And I went home and talked to my wife, and she said, you know, John, you've done this. You know how to do it. You need to do it here. Because we have a stake in this county. We have young boys here. And so I went back and said, okay, I'll do it. You have to do your part. Because anytime you challenge the system, it's difficult. It's an uphill battle. But worth every bit of the effort. And I'm proud. I'm proud that I took it on. And I'm proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of the message. It's proven. It works. It's evidence-based. And it's exciting to know what's possible here in Sonoma County. So, how does it look? We have faced litigation in our county as a result of the errors and poor decisions. For instance, in Andy Lopez's case, the county is now into that case for over $4.5 million. Now, they will lose that in court. That is a loser. That was a horrific mistake of a killing of a 13-year-old boy, a child. They will lose that. And I based that on 40 years of experience. So they will pay. They will pay dearly. But you know, the tragic thing of that is they lost the trust of the Latino immigrant community. How much is that worth? That's priceless. You know, when you lose trust, you lose something of the heart. And it shows up in a variety of ways. So not only did that bad decision cause that breach in trust in the community, but it also tarnished the entire organization because of a lack of leadership. A a lack of knowing what to do, and a lack of doing it. So, I've talked long enough. I'd like to open it up to questions that you have. And I was on a radio station this morning, a Spanish radio station, and they said, so which questions are off limits? And I said, you know, when you're the sheriff and you're running for sheriff, there are no questions off limits. Any question is permissible. And a door is always open for those questions. So please, what are your questions? Yes?
All right, so what will you do? No. What will you do to change the sheriff's department? Exactly what would you do?
Well, there's right now there's a training program that goes on. And like much of the country, we either train law enforcement to be guardians, peacekeepers, or we train them to be warrior cops. Our training program here in Sonoma County is tilted heavily toward being warrior cops. How do we know? Because of the many cases of litigation that we have and the this exposure we've seen. So this warrior cop thing not only undermines trust in the community, it also makes deputies unsafe because you're not safe. So it actually undermines the morale and the vitality and well-being of the deputies themselves. When they are guardians and peacekeepers, their safety is actually enhanced. Why? Because they're there to help people. They're there to problem solve. And so that's one of the big distinctions as well. The other part of it too is to acknowledge the good work that they are doing and also be more transparent in the sheriff's office. Right now there's an effort for civilian oversight of the sheriff's office that has been thwarted. And as sheriff, I will open the office up, be transparent, and answer any questions that people have, and have an open door. And those are major, major shifts in the sheriff's office. So that's just to name a few. Other questions?
So if it's a matter of changing the way you train people, which makes sense, if you were elected, could you just single-handedly make that decision, okay, we're going to start training you differently starting today, or is that another process that you have to go through?
Thank you. So the question is, could we actually train, can the sheriff actually make that training right now and make that shift? And the answer is yes. So the sheriff is a senior law enforcement person in the county. He's an elected official, so he's most influential. So there is a chief officer body made up of the chief of police, and the sheriff heads that. Now, my success has come from not being a bully and making people do things that they should do. However, there's time where you have to do that. What my orientation is to really clearly articulate the value for all of them in going in this direction. And again, we can base this on evidence, research that shows us that this is the only way to go. You know, our challenge is to catch our sheriff's office up to 21st century policing. That's what it's all about. It's been neglected. We haven't had a contested election in 25 years. That's unconscionable. You know, but now we've got a chance. We actually have this amazing chance for the community to decide what kind of sheriff's office they want. And I believe, based on getting around the county, they want a sheriff's office that is based in being a guardian, helping. If people are in a mental health crisis, there are drugs and alcohol involved, or simply an incorrigible teenager. We want deputies to be able to respond, use a minimum of force, if any, and get a result, and get people help. That's the role of being a guardian. And those are the kinds of things that save lives, empower people, and make our county safer and more secure. And why do I say this? I've been in this field for 40 years. I've been in the most difficult areas you can imagine, all over the country. So I speak from a deep amount of experience and knowledge. We can do this, and we can do this now. Yes, Paul?
What would you do, what is your idea for an outreach program to people of color, and how would you be more inclusive, including women?
Yes. So the mindset of...
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. How can we do outreach for people of color and women? How can we do that?
Inclusiveness or diversity.
Inclusiveness, yes, and diversity. So thanks for that question, Molly. So that's important because we really can't change the mindset of the culture without that. Diversity is the key each and every time of changing the mindset. So when we do attract women and people of color and people from the LGBTQ community, when we attract them in, and then we also help them rise to leadership positions, we dramatically change the culture of the organization, dramatically. And it then reflects the community it serves. There's research that shows us that. What do we have now? We don't have that. We're not even close. Now, what you'll hear is, well, we're trying. Lynn Walsey told me just the other day, she said, you know what? They could have done it if they wanted to. They've had, for God's sakes, 25 years. I think Lynn's right. So what do? Well, the California Peace Officer Standard and Training, the regulatory agency for the state of California to regulate police departments, has an exemplary outreach program that works. Our sheriff's office has never been interested in that, and it's available to us with no cost. So what we need a process. Well, first of all, we need a sheriff who sees diversity as a key to being able to reflect service to the community. So you have to have someone at the top that reflects that. Next, you need a process and a program, just like Peace Officer Standard and Training has, and then you have to go out and recruit. And then you have to be the kind of sheriff that people want to come and work for. And our message, believe me, attracts good candidates. I was just talking to a very experienced woman. She's been a supervisor for a long time, a sergeant. And I said to her, Paget, if I get elected, would you consider coming to the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office? And she said, yeah, if you get elected. I don't want to come now. I said, fine. I said, no, I got it, because we've had litigation in the past where women have been sexually harassed in the sheriff's office. And as you can imagine, they left. The case was settled, and there's no problem. There's no problem. And coincidentally, we've not been able to attract women. What are we confused about? What are we confused about? So this is an exciting opportunity we have, Molly, to actually diversify the department and have it reflect the community and have the kind of sheriff's office that we deserve and that we want. I mean, that we really want. And I'm proud to be a part of that. And it works. It absolutely works.
One more question.
Okay, one more question.
How long are you elected for?
A four-year term.
4 years?
You know, and people say, well, how long does it take to do all this? Depends. Hate to sound like a lawyer. Depends. So the quickest we've done it on 5 occasions is 18 months. That's pretty fast. The longest it has taken is 5 years. So it depends. My approach is to go in, because I have a 25-year background in mediation, which tends to help, is to unify and align people on serving the community and how it serves them. How it serves them and their families. The system right now is in badly need of change. We know that. So, how long does it take? Depends. How long will I be here? As long as it takes to change it. I'll never step away. Never. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before I introduce the next speaker, I will say I will be voting for John, and I'm going to point out 2 reasons. When we different situation, but in Stockton, when they moved from community policing to warrior policing, they were able to drop the homicide rate 30%. Okay, 30% drop in homicides. Think about that. Richmond, which actually went a few steps further, dropped their homicide rate 66%. So again, community policing works. The second is, I have a background in community organizing, so a lot of what you do is you listen to people's stories. And a friend of mine told me soon after I moved here, she's about my age, and she has a college-age daughter. And the daughter stopped at a gas station one evening. Sheriff's deputy pulled up, spoke to her. I guess she didn't exactly sound right or whatever, and he frisked her. The frisking could actually be referred to as sexual abuse. I think it's time for somebody outside the system to move the system. Okay. So I want to introduce the next speaker tonight. It's my honor to present Nils. I have looked at his webpage, heard some good things about him. I am aware that he's an educator, a father, very committed to the environment. But also one of the challenges that we have as progressives is how do we move the system, right? My wife and I sometimes, I don't know if we were embarrassed to admit that we voted for Hillary, but we did. But even voting for Hillary, we knew it was a broken system. So how do we change that, right? So I think Nils has some great thoughts around that, and I'm going to introduce him, and here you go.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Oakmont Progressives. I'm honored to be here with you. So my name is Nils Palsson, and yeah, I think there's a theme tonight. I'm honored to be actually sharing this mic with our future Sheriff Mutz, because we're coming from a system that's broken, and we're moving into a system that actually works for people. Not just, not the top 1/10 of 1%, not, people who are from a privileged background, but everybody. Everybody, women, people of color, children, elders, every human being. And, my quest is to be doing this for United States House of Representatives. Yeah.
So what are you a candidate for?
I am running for United States House of Representatives for U.S. Congress. And, and I felt many, many parallels with the previous speaker, and one of them having been a comment about there not having been a contested election for the last couple of decades. So I'm running up against a 20-year incumbent, and there has not been a contested election in this district in those decades. And it's partially because this, thankfully, I suppose, is that this district is so solidly Democratic that in the top 2 California primary, there's traditionally been our Democratic incumbent, and then the second spot has gone to, most often, a Republican. And so, the Republican is never going to win the 5th District of California. So the Democratic incumbent has been reelected and reelected without any actual pressure from the progressive side, from the people. And so my quest, the purpose of my being here today to talk with you, my purpose in running for office to begin with, is so that we are creating a system that actually works for people. Because right now, that's not the system that we have. And Tom mentioned, I'm a father, I've got a 5-year-old daughter, I'm sure many of you have children and grandchildren, and as a dad, I'm concerned about the world that we're passing on to the next generation. I'm concerned about what's going on with the climate crisis. I'm concerned about systemic wealth inequality and racial injustice and wounds that have still not been healed. And I'm concerned about what things are going to be like for the next generation, you know, let alone the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th generation down. And I believe that our descendants are going to look back at us at this moment in history, and they're either going to thank us for having had the courage to do something big to make the change that we need, or hopefully they'll even be there, you know, to curse our names. Because right now, this is the moment. And I feel like with a lot of the issues that motivate me, that impassion me to move forward as a public servant, including the climate crisis and the wealth inequality crisis and the racial injustice crisis and mass incarceration and mass deportation, all of these issues are demanding our action right now. And I feel like I'm talking to the choir on much of that. The question is, you know, okay, maybe the question is, why should we vote for you? So, I mean, I could speak a little bit about my background. I'm 32 years old. I'm from San Francisco originally and grew up in Pacifica. When I was 18, moved to New York to go to NYU, and I was pretty much my whole history have been an activist and involved in this people's movement toward change, toward social change and political change. The problem was that for so long, it didn't seem actionable. You know, like I was involved in Obama's initial campaign, and that seemed like the action to take at the time. And I've seen us making steady progress in many ways. And in many ways, I've seen us kind of just stalled out. And part of what that did was make me throw my hands up a little bit. I didn't quite know where to begin. And it was when I was living in Harlem, actually after having graduated from NYU, that my next step was made abundantly clear to me. And it was when I got a call from my father letting me know that he was back in the Bay Area, back here in California, letting me know that he was dying with leukemia. And so I came back to be with him. I spent his last 8 months with him. He died at 57, you know, talk about defining moments. And I came back, and not only did I go through these, you know, rounds of chemo with him, I came face to face with the indignity of our for-profit healthcare system. And, you know, being this aspiring change agent, there was all these things that I wanted to do sort of for the collective, you know, this sort of like, almost it was this intellectual, like, oh, we need to change the system. And my next step was just to be there and to be present. And I learned a whole lot from what I now refer to as the angel of death. You know, is that if you really want to, you know, kind of get your finger on the pulse of life and what matters about life, then deal with death. You know, maybe for me it came to, you know, thinking about my own mortality and what my purpose on this planet was. And after those months face to face with this for-profit healthcare system, my father did make his transition, and my family had to deal with hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt that he incurred during that time. Some treatments he wasn't able to get because of, you know, not being, you know, insured and covered to that level, not having a ton of money. And so his widow lost our family home in the wake of that. And it was sort of during my healing in that process that I decided to move up to Lake County, where I spent the better part of the last decade of my life. I moved up to Lake County initially sort of for fresh air and to you know, go through this healing process and, you know, kind of to be with myself. And what I found instead was more community, more connection than I'd ever experienced in my life, and people who actually really cared about each other and cared about the future. And so gradually I started sort of getting back into the affairs of the collective, the community. I began substitute teaching. I began meeting with local sort of progressive groups and local community groups. And something that came through me at the time was completely nonpartisan. It was grassroots community organizing around what's known as the transition model. And it's that term, transition towns, it's not quite a household name yet. But there's a movement going on around the world and around our country of people coming together locally, regardless of political party, to work on things that matter to everybody. From, you know, a lot of what it comes down to is things like local food, protecting local watersheds, local alternative energy infrastructure, strong local economies, time banking, reskilling, building local community. And local, the buzzword is resilience. You know, building a community that is strong, that's ready to weather, be it, you know, climate-related disasters, you know, economic instability. There have been recessions and depressions in our history, and there's a question of what's going to happen when the truck stops coming over the hill to deliver things that were made in China, or apples that were harvested in Chile, and what's going to happen when that truck stops coming over the hill, to bail us out after when there's a fire, and is our community resilient and ready? And so I began working in Lake County on this local resilience model, and I co-founded Transition Lake County and Community with some other folks there, while becoming a teacher of United States history in public school, while becoming a father to my now 5-year-old daughter. And that whole time, also I was working at the local radio station. I had my own program. It was called Wake Up and Thrive. So we would play music and interview local political candidates, and then speak about current affairs and politics and things like that. And around 2014, I interviewed the challenger to our then 8th-term incumbent congressman. And it's just another sort of one of the many people, footnotes in history of people who attempted to challenge Mike Thompson. But he kind of planted a seed in me when I interviewed this guy on my radio show. It was like, planted the seed of what if we actually did have a people's candidate who was standing for social justice and racial justice and environmental and economic justice for all, and who wasn't coming at it from a sort of fringe, this person that I was interviewing on my show at the time was leading with, we need to legalize marijuana, which is a fair point, absolutely a fair point, where this is 2018, of course we need to decriminalize marijuana, but that's not the thing you lead with if you want to be, elected. And he was leading with things like, okay, we need to, abolish the Federal Reserve. Okay, well, maybe there's questions about whether the Federal Reserve is fair or a good idea. But again, you don't lead with that. You don't lead with, 9/11 conspiracy theories, right? Like, we've got more, if you actually want to run a winning campaign for the United States House of Representatives, there are things that can bring everyone to the table. There are things, especially right now, like Medicare for all and protecting Social Security that can bring people to the table. There's things like jobs with justice, raising the minimum wage, even things like a federal job guarantee, rebuilding our infrastructure and alternative energy, green renewable energy infrastructure, and getting people to work, rebuilding bridges and building roads and not imprisoning people, but building up schools and having, tuition-free public colleges and universities and universal pre-K. And there are so many things that can bring all of us to the table. And so that 2014 interview planted the seed of what if there was, somebody challenging our blue dog, Democrat in a way that could actually bring people to the table and actually move the conversation in the way that I believe that future generations need us to move it, which is in a way that is regenerative and just and, caring for all people. Not just making decisions in the interest of the wealthiest 1/10 of 1%, wealthy donors, big corporations and their lobbyists. And so, okay, that's the system we're coming from, and without any blame or shame for where we've been. Maybe even similar to the policing background. Where we're coming from is a system that wasn't really honoring people. Where we're coming from is a system in which elections were financed by huge corporations and the wealthiest donors, and without any blame or shame, just recognizing that we need to be moving things in a different direction here. And so, the wave of the future is actually electing representatives that are not of the wealthy elite ruling class, but that are of the people, everyday people who care about our families and communities and the actual lived struggle of the people that live in our neighborhoods. People who, have many different colors and many different gender orientations and many different ages, and we're all kind of needing to share this fire, the fire that keeps us warm, right? We all, and speaking of fire, right, here we are in a region that's been devastated by fire. I was living in Lake County when the Valley Fire happened, and I was displaced by the Valley Fire in 2015 and moved here just in time for another devastating fire. Sorry about that, you guys. But there's a question of what it takes to actually build a resilient infrastructure that's ready to weather these changes. It was another sort of defining moment. So when I started thinking about running for this office, and if I did in 2016, I came in third in the primary. I ended up being elected to be a delegate for Bernie Sanders, so that it's like, as far as like a platform that might give some indication of where I stand on many of the specific issues you might be curious about. Also happy to answer all those questions. But I went to Washington, D.C. to see if I wanted this office, to see if I wanted to actually, work in Congress. And I went out there and I met my congressman. I expressed the concerns of my generation of millennials who are really worried about global climate crisis and really worried about wealth inequality and racial injustice and police brutality and for-profit healthcare system and mass incarceration. And I felt like I kind of got the brush off. And what I was told was, quote, "You'll never get money out of politics." And I felt like that was a challenge. And I actually feel like that's the challenge of our lifetime right now, is that all of these issues, at the end of the day, whether we really care about Medicare for all, or whether we really care about transforming the prison industrial complex into an actual system of restorative justice and regenerative, or if we care about local food, if we care about the climate crisis and renewable energy, whatever it is that we care about, if we care about peace and ending the threat of nuclear annihilation, whatever that thing is, we could trace it all back to the influence of big money in politics, and that seems to be the thing that's blocking our progress. The fact that huge corporations, they're big lobbyists, super PACs, and these huge entities that have a vested interest in things not changing the way that we need to, mostly for the sake of shareholder return in the next quarter. The seventh generation be damned, the watershed be damned. And it's those interests that are preventing the progress that we need on all of these issues. And so I decided on that trip to Washington that I would run for Congress, and I came back, and actually on my way back, I passed through my New York City, my old temporary hometown, my college town of New York, and the day after I made that decision in DC, Bernie Sanders, this obscure Vermont senator that few people had ever heard of, announced that he was running for president. And I kind of took that as a positive omen. And I came back, and very shortly after that was when the Valley Fire happened. I got you, yeah, I will take some questions in a second. I just need to kind of get to this other defining moment. So, when the Valley Fire happened, I put the political thing aside. I hadn't declared as a candidate yet. It was all about just getting needs met locally. Working at the local radio station to get resources where they needed to go, in the disasters you saw it here in Sonoma County. The best actually comes out of us. We care for each other. We take care of each other. And so I wasn't thinking about the political thing. I was just thinking about my community and my neighbors. Until a few months into the disaster, it was time to decide, to declare as a candidate, to file or not, to run or not to run. And I spent one of those defining moment nights reading on the internet, clicking around on the Federal Election Commission website. And I started doing some research and finding that our then 9-term Democratic representative was accepting huge donations from lobbyists representing the military-industrial complex and the largest weapons manufacturers, representing fossil fuel companies, representing health insurance giants, telecom giants, big pharma, big ag, big alcohol. I mean, every huge corporate lobby you don't want running your government. Those are the ones that we're paying into. And I clicked around many representatives, Democrats, Republicans, they're all taking money from these big lobbyists. And so that's when I decided I was all in, and I did it. I was displaced from my home, during the process of running for office. And as I mentioned, I came in third. Now 2 years later, I'm doing it again, and I'm doing it for my daughter and for my unborn grandchildren and the 7th generation to come. And wherever we are on the political spectrum, wherever we are in age, whatever skin tone we might have, we're all in this together, and we all need a system that actually works for human beings. And so I'm just standing here doing my best, and I'm willing to be that person who builds a bridge from the social movement, people who want a just system that works for everybody, to the halls of government, because I believe we need to have representatives that actually represent, that actually represent our voices and needs in the halls of Congress. That's what I'm here to do. I'm happy to take any questions. I didn't go too long. Do you have time for a couple questions?
Yeah.
Sure. It's usual for people who want to climb the political ladder to have lesser jobs and go for them, especially on a local level. You want to start at the top. Tell us about that.
I'd be glad to. And that is actually a question that I get a lot. And
Can you repeat the
so it was about like, there's this kind of a process of climbing the political ladder of like, why run for Congress, not start off, I'm imagining city council, state legislator, and so on. And my answers to that first is that experience comes in many forms. So my experience isn't being a politician. I'm not a slick and polished politician. I don't have experiences, for example, taking money from big corporations. What I do have experience as, though, is a working class person, a renter, a father, a public school teacher, a grassroots community organizer, and that's the background that I bring. And it just feels like my quest, in the sense of when I look at what's going on with the climate crisis and our environment, and when I look at what's going on with widespread wealth inequality, it feels really urgent. And that urgency calls me forward. And if I saw it, there are many people in the community that I respect deeply who are more seasoned than me, older than me, held some public office, and if they were running for this office, I would support them. I would hold their sign up. But when I went to see who was running, there was not anybody running. And so it's like, we either got the status quo, we got the establishment, or we got someone for the people. And I'm not polished as a politician. I'm just a person. And that is what our government is supposed to be made of, by, and for the people. And so it's my imperfect offering, is just to be here, a man of the people, willing to do the job. I hope that answers your question. Yes, sister.
Can I have the mic?
Yeah, please, I'd love that.
I was wondering, is there an age that you have to be in order to be in the Senate? And you said you're 32, right?
Right.
Okay.
Totally. Yeah, it is. It's actually in our Constitution. And to run for House of Representatives, the age is 25. To run for Senate, the age is 30. So actually, I could be running for senator, but that's not my desire. I saw her hand. Now, next.
So I understand the not wanting the big money thing, but how are you going to finance yourself?
Make checks payable too. Those calls for Congress. Okay. No, I'm very much running on a grassroots kind of Bernie Sanders style model. I've got a CrowdPack page up on my website. I get $27, $20, $30, sometimes $100 donations from members of the community. And so far, that's been enough to declare as a candidate and get on the ballot, which costs $1,000, and then to get my little 250-word blurb in this little thing that you got here. So to get your little blurb, that costs about $10,000 for the district. And I've raised roughly about that amount based on small donations. I don't have an advertising budget or anything like that. And I'm sure I could be doing more to fundraise. I'm also, I don't know if I mentioned, I'm working 2 jobs. I'm a renter. I'm in student debt, and I'm doing my best to keep it all moving. But yeah, I guess my answer is $27 at a time.
The talking stick.
I think you have a very good platform. I agree with everything you've stated, and I think you should be an elected official. However, don't you think of all of the things for which you stand, if those could be changed, Bernie Sanders would be doing that right now?
There was that other question earlier about how to do it and how long is it going to take. And I want Bernie Sanders or someone like that to be my president by all means. And no matter how awesome our president is, if we want laws that reflect Bernie Sanders' platform, then we need to elect a brand new Congress that's going to represent that platform. And if we want laws that are going to be representing our people, then we need the Congress to be representing those people and not the wealthy corporations and lobbyists. And so do I think Bernie Sanders would or should or could be doing it? Yes, Bernie or someone Bernie-esque would be wonderful. And in every district around the United States, there's this movement happening. I'm not the only person like me holding this kind of mic right now, is that there is this brand new Congress movement happening. And I don't know if we're gonna be able to do it, right now, 2018 to 2020, lamed up, Donald Trump years. I don't know about that. I just know that as we elect the president that's going to be representing these values, then we're also going to be needing a Congress that's going to be standing with people. And it's over the next decade. Right now, we're going into a really epic time in our shared history. And I believe we need people in Congress that are going to be standing with us, the people, and fighting for our common visions and our common needs.
I can tell you have really high ideals, and I would agree with you that the Democratic Party has a lot of problems. But in the coming elections that are going forward, it's critical that the Republicans, that the Democrats take the House and take the Senate. So and you're a nice guy. But I'm just remembering, people voted for Jill Stein in the presidential election, which was like a vote for Trump. So, are you splitting the votes, making it easier for the Republicans to retain?
Thank you. That is such an important question, and I'm excited to speak to it. What's really exciting about this midterm election for this congressional seat is that there actually is no Republican in this race right now. There is no Republican. It is a top two primary, and so Mike Thompson's going to be one of the top two, and the other of the top two, you've got a Green candidate and you've got two no party preference. I'm running independent. I was a Democrat. I ran as a Democrat in 2016. Now I'm running as an independent because strategically in the primary, I want to be the person representing the social movement, the people's movement, going into the November election. And I would like to be able to attract many votes. But there is no chance of wasting a vote, splitting a vote, giving a vote to a Republican. There is none. So I'm actually the only challenger who's got that 250-word statement in the vote by mail guide. So hopefully this primary should be a breeze. But there's no chance of splitting the vote. So actually, when we go into November, you're going to have a Democrat incumbent, and I could actually even choose to re-register as a Democrat if I wanted to for the November election. I don't know, it would be a question of what's strategically the best idea. Because if there's a November election with a Democrat and an independent, maybe you could have a Bernie Sanders-like independent voice. That's actually, I would caucus with the Democrats, I would caucus with the Progressives, and we would have a voice in there to bring things in the progressive direction that I believe we all want to see things go. But fortunately, there is no Republican in this race, so I don't have to worry about being a spoiler. Was there one more?
Not really a question, but a comment and a reply to the previous questioner. I think, for me, we're in a situation where we've already seen what our current government is doing for us, and I'm all for throwing those people out whole cloth. And to have someone who has energy and interest and clearly a progressive platform, I'm all in.
Thank you. I'm all in too. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm going to hang out. I've got an email sign-up sheet info.
I will say I also will be voting for Nils in this election. I'll say that. And one of the reasons is I do think in this county, your question is real important. We're going to talk a little bit about red to blue, and a number of us are walking some of the districts in the Central Valley because we do think it is important that the Republicans be turned out and in those cases Democrats be elected. But one of the unique things about this county is it is a progressive county, and if any of you were here for Julie Combs' presentation about money and the local environment, a lot of the dynamics that go on in the big picture go on in this county. But I think there is the opportunity in this county to create some unique progressive alliances that shift the Democratic Party in this area to a much more progressive party, to a much more, and some of this will be with the Democrats and some of it will be to the left of Democrats. I think there are some opportunities here to do some unique things, but it only matters if we're organized. And also, I was going to ask Nils, how come he's so old to be running? Because in Stockton, some of you might be aware, we just left, it's a 29-year-old mayor who was on city council, African-American young man, Michael Tubbs, who's a progressive. And one of the things about Michael is he appeals to a lot of young people who we need to get engaged in the system. And again, so I think he might be a little old to be running, but we'll maybe pass on that. Speaking of young men, I'll ask Marty to come up here and talk a little bit about some of the efforts to flip Congress.
Thank you. Chris is passing out a sheet that I'd like to talk from or about. We in the Progressives group are doing a flip a district campaign, otherwise often known as red to blue. And we're doing it in many ways. How many of you have been working here locally with Linda Hemingway and her organization in terms of, so that's the first item on this list in our sort of how to work to flip a district, is to work with Linda and her organization. And she puts out a fabulous email blast every Tuesday on the different ways in which you can work locally. Everything from going to Round Table Pizza in Montgomery Village and doing postcarding to texting groups and phone banks, etc., all done in the local Santa Rosa area. So I put her email address there and her phone number so you could contact her if you want to work locally on Flip a District. Now, that's not just for congressional flipping, that's for other offices as well, but there are some congressional districts. We have a great opportunity with congressional districts because if we can just flip 20 districts out of the 435, we will have a majority Democrats by one Democrat, 218 to 217. So there are, in California alone, 14 districts of our 53 congressional districts in California that are thought to be flippable. So we can contribute 14 flips, and all the rest of the country has to do is contribute 6, and we take back the House. So it's a very, very opportune time. We have kind of settled on, among the Progressive Board, on the idea of working in District 10. District 10 is the Tracy-Stockton area. The holder of that office is a guy named Denham. He's a 6-term Republican. He only won by 3 points in 2016, and Hillary Clinton took that district by 3 points in 2016. It's a district that's 45% Latino. The bottom line on that district is if we get a good turnout, which of course is very difficult in a midterm election, if we get a good turnout, we will flip that district. And they have a very strong organization of progressives and Democrats that are working together in Tracy, which is the area we're going to. And we went there this last Saturday, Chris and Tom and I, and we were put to work by that organization out in the neighborhoods doing canvassing to get out the vote. That's the focus, is get out the vote. We were calling on Democrats and those that had not declared a party preference to see if we could convince them to vote Democratic in those cases, but basically getting everybody out to vote is the name of the game. In 2014, the last midterm election, they have 39,000 registered voters in Tracy, 6,500 voted. So we're talking less than 20%. If we can get 30% even, or maybe 40% out to vote, that will flip the district. So now this is the primary. The reason we need a big turnout for the primary is that there are 2 Republicans running. There's a Tea Party Republican and Denham. So it is possible in a top 2 primary that both of the seats, both of the candidates in the general election could be Republicans. So in the primary, we need to get out the vote, make sure we have at least a Democrat running against Denham, and then there'll be in the general election a lot more work to do. But the Democratic and Progressive group are very optimistic that one of their leading contenders will be the one who is up against Denham in the general election in November. So we're working in several ways. Right now, the main thing we're doing is supporting the Tracy Progressive group in getting out the vote. We were out last Saturday. I'm going to go back up this coming Saturday. It's shown on here. We'll be meeting here in the parking lot here in the East Rec Center at 7 o'clock in the morning to travel to Tracy, get there around 9 or 9:30. We get trained. They have a very good training program. If you have a smartphone, bring it, because now, we used to do canvassing where you had your printed sheets and filled all the printed sheets up. No more. Now, all your questions you're asking and all your survey results are all on your smartphone. So So, and if you don't have a smartphone, you'll be paired with someone who does. But everybody will get a training. The training's from about 10 till 11, and then we go out at about 11 and work the canvassing until about 2 or 2:30, and then head back home. We should be back here by about 5:30. So that's going to happen on Saturday, and then after that, there's no more voter registration after a week from Tuesday, a week from tomorrow. And so after that, the next canvassing will be June 1st to June 5th, the actual day of the primary. And we'll, not sure if we'll go up every one of those days, but we'll have Tom and I and Chris will work out days in which we're going to be going up in those days leading up to the primary. Now, there's also going to be work for the that District 10 that'll go on here in our, right here in Santa Rosa and possibly at Oakmont, again with postcarding, texting, and phone banks. Tom and Chris and I have not met with the person from Tracy that is organizing that, but we'll have some more information that'll go out by email to you all if you don't feel like you want to go up to Tracy, but would like to help in the District 10 flipping. So, and then finally, there's just one last item, number 3 on this list. That's a crazy idea that I read about in a magazine that I want to put out to everyone. And Nils, you might have a feeling about this one as well. That is the idea of voting for the number 2 candidate for governor and the number 2 candidate for U.S. Senator instead of for the leaders, Newsom and Feinstein. And I've listed the number 2 candidate, at least by the current polls, the number 2 Democratic candidate. Sorry, I didn't say number 2 candidate, I meant number 2 Democratic candidate for each of those. Because if we can get a situation where the top 2 primary yields 2 Democrats for governor and 2 Democrats for U.S. Senator, the end result will be a much lower turnout in the general election by Republicans, because they don't have a contender in the top 2 races. Or in our case, they won't have a contender among the top 2 here in our congressional district. So the fewer top races that don't have a Republican running, the lower the Republican turnout will be. And that'll help Democrats all over the state. So it's my suggestion and that you vote for Billy DeRosa for governor and De Leon for senator, because the more it increases the chance that we're going to have 2 Ds at the top of the ticket, and Republicans will not show up in such great numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any questions? Does anybody feel like they will turn out on Saturday to go up to Tracy? 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Just curious. Okay, it's a commitment, but we'll see. We'll have a few of us. So be sure though, if you do make a decision, you can do it. Just come here. Food is provided. They have breakfast and lunch served at the Democratic Progressive headquarters here in Tracy.
Oh, yeah.
So that you don't have to bring food necessarily unless you have special food that you want to bring. Bring water. They have water too, but bring water. It can be hot there and want to not dehydrate. So thank you.
So we'll pass this around.